Hello, Pavi, and welcome to our second episode that we do in the framework of Buddhist psychology, centered around the book by Pema Chödrön, which is called When Things Fall Apart. We did our first episode that was mainly centered around fear, and today we probably get more to the core of the book and the chapter that is eponymous with
When things fall
When
apart.
Things Fall
Yeah,
Apart, right. And you would like to do a short introduction into what Prema Chödrön is writing, and then we will have a discussion about it because a lot of it will not be self-evident.
perfect. Yeah, so Doc, I'm kind of excited to talk about this particular chapter because, this is something that sort of the reason why I picked up the book. This is the title of the book itself. Um, and basically, like to explain what she means by when she says when things fall apart. Um, she the gist of the book that she says, and I'll just read it verbatim. She's like, when things fall apart and we are on the verge we know not what, the test of each of us is to stay on that brink and not concretize. The spiritual journey is not about heaven and finally going to a place that's really well, but that's really swell. And she kind of stops there and then it goes into the story. um,
That in
but to
itself is
talk,
already not understandable. Like, what is that? It's very
yeah,
poetic.
yeah, very, very poetic, very like, sounds good to the ear for
Yes.
me. But she goes deeper into the book and she sort of like gives her own example that, she was told to go to Gambo Abbey. It's like, one of a really big Buddhist abbey, and she was already a monk, and she was asked to sort of lead this particular abbey and be the director for it. And she's like, everything and in her life that she had brought to the table, her kindness, lovingness, the way she ran. She's like, everybody, all her peers started hating on her. Every move she made sort of backfired. And that's something I think, like, all of us can relate. I certainly can relate to my career. Couple different times, right? Like, you at work, suddenly things are going fine, and then suddenly, every conversation you have has backfired on you.
Mm.
Every thing that you do, people are not liking it, and everything is out in the open. And like, all there are times in life when like all aspects of your life stop working suddenly.
Yeah.
um for me it was my, like, this year, my career had a little bit of a uh, shakiness. And then it was also like me um coming to an acknowledgement that, okay, I'm not going to get to really high levels in my career. I will also started to see my own behaviors and patterns that that I'm unable to overcome, right?
Mm.
So that, I think that is what she means when she says, like, when things fall apart, you get to this depression, um, and this place of, I hate where I am in my life right now,
Mhm.
and all of that. And
So it sounds
basically what
like, can
she,
I sum it up as a personal crisis?
a personal crisis, yeah, almost a personal crisis, right?
Mhm.
Like, it could be a more career driven than anything else. But she talks about, it could be all different aspects of your
Yes.
life.
Yes.
What she recommends in the book is, the line that she says is, things don't really get solved, they come together and they fall apart. um, and what she recommends that um, we do in life is stay in the not knowing, have room to be like, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, and have room for grief, for relief, for joy. And I don't know what that means, but when she put it in that story, in this famous Buddha story, I think you also mentioned it in one of your podcasts. And the story goes like, a family in a village had one son, um, and one horse. And um, uh, one day the horse runs away, and people are like, oh, this is so bad. And the farmer's like, I don't know if it's bad. Then the son goes to Then the next day, the horse comes back and brings
Mhm.
10 other horses. And people are like, oh my God, you're so lucky. And the farmer's like, I don't know if it's good for me. The third day, the one of the wild horses breaks his son's leg. And people are like, oh, you poor thing, you only had one son, and now nobody can even handle your horses. Such a bad thing happened to you. And the farmer's like, I don't know if this is like, uh, if this is bad. The next day, the army comes and they're recruiting all the able young men, but they leave the farmer's son behind. And people are like, oh, this is such a good thing. And again, he's like, I don't know. And so the story sort of
Yeah.
continues. And her point, obviously, of the story and is that we don't know whatever is happening to us, whether this, the crisis in our life that's happening to us. We don't know if this is good or bad. And the thinking that we generally have in our life of the once I get there, I will be happy,
Mhm.
right? We all, like, I think, like most of your listeners and all of us understand that that's a fallacy. But something that she pointed that I didn't even realize was the whole concept of heaven and hell. It actually comes from that thinking of once I get there, I will be happy, right? Like once you get to heaven, you will forever be happy.
Once
And she's
I'll
like,
go where? Can you
once once you're out of this situation, once I get this next job, once I get into a bigger house, all those things that we have,
Yes.
if I will be happy. And she says that that is what sort of like causes us suffering. And what we need to remember when we are in these moments of life crisis is we need to remember that this won't last, um, and this too shall pass, right? Sort of,
Yes.
um, and we need to do is sort of stay with the shakiness, right? So she basically yes, so that is sort of the essence of the book is stay with that shakiness, don't run away, don't try to like start solving all your life problems, and stay
Mhm.
in that, you know like at least stay in that emotional state where you don't know.
Yes.
um, and I wanted to, yeah, and that's, I think, is a very much that Buddhist concept of life is suffering, and you need to accept that life is suffering. And that is
Mhm.
something I really wanted to sort of understand, because to me, when I was having a lot of like life crisis, all I wanted to do was like run away and fix it or change my scenario. And I was reading self-help books, I was trying to grow. My question here is, how do you how do you sort of, number one, do you agree with this? And number two, how do you stay with that suffering if that is the way to, you know, if that is the way to grow? And question number three, sort of like, I think to me, the most important of all is when I've been going through these kind of life crises, right? These books talk about observing yourself, and I think you yourself say, okay, be curious and see how you behave. And
Yes.
I see myself, and even though I'm seeing myself making those same mistakes, I'm unable to, number one, stop. And number two, even when I see myself, I still keep making those mistakes, which brings my, confidence even further down, because now I'm even observing making myself make those mistakes and following the same behavior patterns of before, but I'm unable to make that change. And
Yes.
how do you do that? Like, how do
Okay.
you change?
There are many topics in
Many
there.
questions.
We have
Yeah.
to work on them one by one. First of all, this supposedly Buddhist idea of life is suffering is not a correct representation of the old Buddhist teachings. Uh, Actually, you never find this quote in the old texts. What you do find is there is dukkha, of which
Hmm.
suffering is an interpretation. It's a too strong word. Dukkha is somewhere in between unsatisfactoriness and suffering. It has a spectrum of meanings. So, toothache
Yeah, in
is
in
dukkha.
Hinduism, dukh just means um sad or pain.
Ah, okay, interesting. Still in
Yeah, it
Hindi?
doesn't really mean, yeah,
Uh-huh.
dukh just means sad or pain in Hindi.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
which is dukkha. In English, it would be, if you write it down, it'll be pronounced dukkha, but dukh is what we say, right? Like, it's just pain, suffering, sadness.
Yes. So it
Yeah.
covers a range of kind of uneasiness or problematic states. So in the text, you find there is dukkha, there is unsatisfactoriness, but not that the whole life is unsatisfying or suffering. And that would also not work, would not be consistent with the Buddhist teaching, because the Buddhist teaching is part of life. So what the Buddhist teaching is suffering too? No, of course it's not, right? It's presented as a multi-layered escape, a multi-layered a path to deep satisfaction. So that, of course, is not suffering, not unsatisfactory. But it's the fact of life that there is something like deep dissatisfaction, frustration, pain, grief, all these things are real, right?
Yeah.
So even though it's just part of life, it's still sometimes we have situations where we face the question, okay, I don't know anymore. I don't know what to do with that, because this is the strongest that I've experienced this. I'm not equipped for this.
Yeah.
Or it's a kind of pain or suffering or grief that I don't know how to handle. Like pets died, that was horrible, but now that my parents are dead, I don't know how to deal with that, for example. So there are situations where the pain, dissatisfaction, grief, and so on just reaches an amount or a quality that it leaves us kind of in doubt if we can take it, right? So even in the softer, more correct version of the Buddhist interpretation, it's still accurate in the sense that, okay, even if life is a back and forth of kind of joy and suffering, eventually suffering reaches a stage that leaves me helpless and where I need kind of tools to deal with that. Okay, now to what she writes about her issues as an abbot, as a leader of a nunnery, of a monastery. That is not really comparable to many people's situation, isn't it?
I
mean,
think so. I think it is, right? Like you join
how
you
about
join an
domestic violence?
agency.
So
That's true.
I stay in observing the situation, and also this beating shall pass. Let me not do something
Yeah.
like that. Or my
Yeah. I think
unemployment. It's like probably I should just watch my unemployment and stay in this groundlessness, and then something will magically appear because I'm cool-minded.
I think what she, in the way I interpreted it, like, I think domestic violence or all of that is definitely a much more different issue. But what she, I think, is talking about is, even in unemployment, right? Like right now, I personally am in that situation where I'm trying to figure out my own next role and my career. And what she talks about is, rather than continuously focusing on, okay, when am I going to get the next role? Today I didn't get a role. Today, tomorrow. What she's saying is just like sit with it, and
Sit
it
with
does.
what
It's
exactly?
sit with the fact that you are right now in the unknowingness, right? Like you don't know where your career is going to take you. You don't know where your life is going to take you. You don't know how next year, with COVID and all, how next year is going to roll out, how the economy will roll out, rather than trying to like just continuously trying to fix things, which I think which a lot of us have issues with. I think the way what she's talking about is stay in that unknowing. Not that it's something I can do, but I don't know if you like, like how when you have problems abundant in your life, right? Like you
Yes.
have
Well, my first question is, before you come to the how, why? Why should I stay in? So I have a lot of issues. I have financial issues. I have planning issues. Like my next steps will determine how my next year or two will look like. why the hell should I just stay in that and let time pass and not do anything about it? I don't understand.
Oh yeah, that I
What
agree with.
the
Yeah.
what is the promise there? What is the good? What is the great outcome of that? What is the promise?
So I think the promise that she's sort of talking about is, um, even when you get a job, right? And even once in a year, once you get a job and everything's, um, there's going to be other set of problems. So I think what she's saying is like, there's going to be problems in life throughout.
Yeah.
Um, so you might as well, like right now, you have an unemployment problem, or you don't have a job, a problem. Um, you are going to keep doing what you're doing, but you just stay in the fact that once you get a job, you'll also be, there's going to be unsatisfaction or unhappiness of some other kind at that time.
Okay.
So I think that's what she's talking
I
about.
stay in not understanding what this all means. So, okay, I'm unemployed. I have different possibilities of how to go
Hmm.
about that, right?
Yeah.
I'm concerned for my financial future. Maybe I have a family. I have an urge to do something. That is the situation that most people will find themselves in. They feel like, I have to damn do something right now because this is not sustainable. So there's the
Hmm.
pressure and the objective situation. Now, I have 1, 2 job possibilities that are maybe not great. I think about should I take them or not, or I could decide to focus my time on something else. Maybe I can, I will think that I'm not in the right place to make either a good decision or to be employed right now because I would not be efficient. My mind space is not in a
Hmm.
good place. Now, in those options, to do nothing about it and to try to come to terms with the existential problems, basically, of life not being satisfactory, is, I think, a very, very specific case uh, that would make sense only for very few people. I don't see how, if I have 2 kids and I need food on the table, and yes,
Hmm.
maybe I'm not completely broke, but in 6 months I will be. I don't see why such an advice would be good for most of those people. So
Yeah.
my question is then, under which circumstances does it make sense? Because with those examples, and there are endless similar examples,
Hmm.
the best advice is figure out what is the best job that you can do and do it, so that your kids are not kind of upset about the future while you are trying to figure out the cosmic existential issues that everyone is facing.
Yeah, I think she's talking about the latter, right? Like when she talked about one of the friends who actually got AIDS, and this is back in the 80s, right? So she's like, um, this guy eventually said, I didn't want this and I hated getting AIDS and I was terrified of it. But it turns out that this illness has been my greatest gift. And now it's basically, he's like, when you stay with it or when you try to not always solve it,
Mm-hmm.
um, you end up becoming friends in that situation. And I think she's definitely not talking about, I don't have a mortgage and I don't have money to pay for my kids, but more of
Okay.
those existential questions and problems that we all have, um,
Good. Now,
that we have.
when is my issue an existential issue? Because I can look at it in different ways. So I'm in a job, I'm dissatisfied, right? Income is
Hmm.
fine. I have a husband, a wife, maybe a kid. Like things look fine from the outside.
Hmm.
The typical middle class experience, right?
Yeah.
And yet I feel unfulfilled.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Is that a psychological issue because I have long forgotten to listen to myself and do what I actually want to do, and doing the easy thing of following society's laid out path of having a house and a dog and a job and so on? So is it a psychological issue, or is it an existential issue of a potential seed of realization of, wow, the emptiness that I feel is the
Hmm.
emptiness of life itself? When is
I
it
think
clear
she's
when it's existential and when I should do an existential approach, or when I should approach it psychologically?
um I don't know the answer to that, but to me it's fairly obvious, right? Like if you if you're looking for a job because you have to now pay the mortgage and feed your kids, I think you're not even going to be reading these books. You won't have any time. I think when you read these books are when you're having issues at work that are just like a lot of like either people issues, or you're having like, you are ill and you're going through a health crisis and you're figuring out what do I do with my life. I think those are the only times that you actually even, like in my mind, you pick up these books, right? You figure
Yes.
out what's going on. So like I think we should like sort of focus on that particular thing to begin with, right? Like to me that is what she's talking about. And like I see the value in it, right? Like what she's talking about, right? Like stay with the uncertainty, get the knack of relaxing in the midst of chaos, and learn not to panic. And she calls this as the spiritual path. So I don't know the answer, but yeah, that's what I wanted to sort of like understand from you.
Yes. Okay. So a couple of things there still to make it clear, or at least I think the application of that lies. Again, I
Hmm.
think it's for very specific people in very specific situations. This is not a tool to get problems solved. This is a tool for when the objective reality is what it is anyway, and
Hmm.
it's where there's not kind of a decision to be made. For example, I have a disease, or kind of my business got shut down by COVID. For example, there's nothing immediately that I have to do. So maybe I already reactivated my finance.
Yeah.
Maybe I have already the the temporary job that is necessary to bring food on the
Hmm.
table. I struggle mentally with fate kind of obstructing my life.
Yeah,
Something like
or
that.
I have an illness with which I just have to now live with.
Yes.
There is nothing I can do about it. All that needed to be done, like, which was eat right, go to the doctor, get medication, all of that has been done, but
Yes.
there is still this like, anxiety, panic, depression, right? So
Okay.
I think we are very much in that territory.
Good. Even in this territory, I don't think that it applies to many people. Let's keep in mind this was written by a nun who
Mm-hmm.
for I don't know how many years she was in that position, who's used to think in existential terms, who got on the journey of Buddhism in order to solve a spiritual need, an existential need, right? So she was,
Yeah.
when you are in that space of mind,
Mm-hmm.
where this is your mental home, you think in those kind of categories. And then you stay with something, you stay with an issue. The
Mm-hmm.
solutions will be of spiritual nature. Someone who
Okay.
is, blue collar, working class, or, in service
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, when they stay with groundlessness or whatever fancy word you want to use, their realizations will, I would say, not probably be of a spiritual nature.
Hmm.
Where should that come from? Okay, if I practice that for years, this kind of thinking
Yeah.
deeply, dealing with philosophical texts, challenging my emotions, getting out of my comfort zone, all of things that um, many monastics
Mm-hmm.
experience, then my whole kind of mental apparatus, my unconscious, is already primed to think in those terms to produce these kinds of solutions. Someone who is utterly unprepared for these kind of categories, I don't think that this advice would lead to the same result that she got.
So so I like logically what she's saying. I don't know if they will get the results. For me the problem was not even getting the results. My problem with with this particular thing was, number one, just staying in that feeling of like, the upsetness that when you didn't get that one particular career role
Yes.
that you wanted, and
Yeah.
all of that, like that intensity of emotion and thoughts is so strong, right? That anxiety around health or that upsetness is so strong that like I'm unable to even stay with that,
Yes,
like
but that,
for more than a couple seconds. And
yes.
even when I do, um it's
But tell me, where should
yeah,
that ability come from? I don't understand why you think that it should be just possible to do that. The ability comes from somewhere.
it's the ability to stay in touch with your own emotions um and feelings that I think every human, if all of us were raised in a perfect life and the perfect way, and not have any of our, our parents didn't have their own set of issues, I think you would be in touch with your own feelings and emotions, right? The problem today for all of us, the reason why we read this book, for me, is I I don't want to, like, I'm not even trained to stay with my emotion. Like I run away. I have to force myself, after running away for a couple hours or a couple
Yeah.
days, to sit down and say, okay, what is that, this thought about, fuck, I didn't get that, that opportunity.
Yes.
Fuck, I don't know what's going to happen with my career.
Yes.
All of that, like, it keeps coming. Eventually I will sit down and say, okay, let me observe what's happening.
Let,
Or
let's look
I
at
made
what
the
you just said.
same mistake, yeah,
Yes. Okay.
again in my career, that I told myself not to do. Now what do I do? So
I,
um
I understand.
yeah.
Let's look at that. So you say if we're in tune with ourselves, we should be able to look at emotions. I don't think so. What are emotions made up for? For looking at them?
Thoughts,
No.
feel them.
Not what they're made of, what they're made for. What is the purpose of emotions? Emotions make us run. It's not a
Yeah.
TV show that you enjoy watching. When I'm happy, I want to jump around and kiss someone or
Hmm.
booze or have a
Yeah.
party or something. When I'm sad, I want to indulge into my self-pity, or when I'm aggressive, I want to punch something. Emotions are not to be, deeply, quietly in touch with. So already that is, um, I think you acquired this kind of notion culturally. It's maybe from, I don't know where it's from. And on a large scale, it started in the 60s and 70s, I guess, and then continued um, to be proclamated by culture in throughout the last decades, through psychology and coaching and so on. But even though it's very common, this notion that we should be in touch with emotions, what actually happens is that we still want to run with the emotions, and part of the mind is still running. And we expect something that is very much against the grain of emotions. There's nothing natural about watching our emotions. I'm not saying that it's bad. I think it's a good thing. But I just want to raise the bar of what it is that we are trying to do there. Effectively, when you tell a common person to look at their emotion, right, and to stay with
Hmm.
it, to be in touch with it, whatever metaphor you want to use, what will happen is that they will look partly at it. They will look partly at it, not realizing that with the other part of their mind, they're running with the emotion.
But the whole mindfulness, the Buddhist psychology around the whole mindfulness
Yeah.
or being mindful,
Yeah.
like all of that is all about getting in touch with your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings in that moment.
Yes.
And that, to so you don't agree with that? Like,
What I'm saying is it's so much more difficult than what is popularized right now. The reason why it doesn't work, right? So, for example, I lost this job opportunity on which I depended
mhm.
so much. My mind is freaking out,
Yeah.
right? I read books, I heard people, whatever. speaking about mindfulness, I tell myself, you know what, there's nothing that can be done about it right now. Let me be in touch with it. Let me observe that. Maybe that helps. I sit down and honestly try to do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I do it. So I'm looking from the outside, right? With an all-knowing camera. I see what is going on. And at the same time, I interview the person. I ask the person, are you completely looking at it? The person says, yes, I'm observing it completely. What I see with the all-seeing camera, what this is recording, is the person is observing it for 20%, not seeing that with 80% of their mind, they're still feeding and continuing the misery that keeps them at their difficult place. Okay, after half an hour of contemplation, the person says, you know what, fuck that, it doesn't work. I looked at it, I still feel miserable. So this mindfulness thing is not for me, right? It's not executed well. Also, this execution of fully looking, if I was able to fully look at it, yes, there would be a deep realization. I would step out of the misery, at least for a while. For half a day, I would have kind of realizations of peace and kind of a complex understanding of my situation. And then slowly life would seep back into my mind. But at least I would have a little bit more of a tool. Most people cannot do that, I claim. This ability to really be in touch with your emotions or to look at it in a mindfulness way is highly demanding. So I'm not against the concept. I'm against kind of propagating it as if this is something that can be done just because I'm in the mood or just because I'm in a difficult situation, that suddenly, just because I think that I'm doing everything that is necessary, that this is in fact so. It's not in fact so. Just because I think that I'm a great painter right now does not make me a great painter. And it's the same with observation, insight, and meditation or mindfulness.
So so coming back then to the question of, okay, you know what, I am going through, I'm going through my life crisis, whether it is everything that I planned for in life couldn't happen because my health took a toll and now I have a disease because of which I'm stuck in a place. Or you take another example of, you know what, I made a whole bunch of career mistakes that I couldn't call them mistakes or whatever, career lessons, but now I'm at a place where I'm unhappy with my career. And not just that, I also see me making the same set of mistakes with my partner.
Yes.
And I see myself doing the same mistakes over and over again. And I'm in this really dark space. What would you recommend that a person does?
Yes. Then? So let's stay still in the framework that that Pema Chödrön kind of recommends, because in the end, I think it works. I just don't think that it's described in a realistic way for everyday people. One of the essential aspects in getting out of the rat race and getting out of habits is determination and motivation. That is one of the most important things. Let's look at what determination and motivation actually is in the mind. Determination cannot live very well in a mind that is fuzzy, distracted, all over the place. This is not what it does. A determination is something like a post that is rammed into the ground and stays there.
And that's something that is so tough for most of us, right?
Yes.
To do.
Yes. So I think it's still essential in most cases. So what I would do in a setting of conversations, right, counseling, therapy, meditation, is I would set up conditions so that the motivation becomes stronger, which means in practice, we talk about it. Why do you want to do that? If you don't do that, what happens? Imagine you did whatever you plan to do and you find yourself in 2 months doing the same mistake again. How would that affect you? So we kind of chew through the issue so that there is a deeper understanding of the ramification of the whole thing, right? It's not just an isolated event. It's not just helplessness that wants to find relief, right? It's not just the pain of, when, I don't know, I have toothache, right? It hurts super bad. And because of COVID, for another 2 weeks, I cannot go to the doctor. In those 2 weeks, I swear to myself, okay, no more sweets. This has to end. It's horrible. I indulged in sweets all the time. This is the result of it. I will finish that, right? It's complete garbage, because this is based only on the pain that I'm experiencing right now. This is not deeply founded. So what happens with people is they go to the dentist, 1-2 treatments, pain is gone. Where's the determination? Forgotten. Why? Because the pain is not there anymore. It was not a real determination. It was just the result of the pain. So in the same way, we have to make sure when we work on something in a deeper way that the momentary motivation to change it is not just an effect of me suffering from depression or helplessness about the job market or something, that it's more deeply rooted, so that when there is a small improvement in the circumstances, it doesn't blow away the motivation that I thought I had.
Yes, but in those life crisis moments, right? Any of those situations that I described, how would you, like, let's take one of the examples, right? Like everything that I planned for in life sort of like fell apart because I now have this health problem.
Yes.
So now I have to, like, sort of like go to the doctors often. I can't do the career move I want to do. I can't sort of like, move away from closer to being the doctor, like all those problems, right? Like,
Yes.
what do I do with my life? I may die in the next 10 years, or in the next 5 years. Now, how would you, like, where would the determination and motivation sort of like come in here, right? Like in here, yes, I want to get better, but the days I'm feeling better, I don't, like, want to eat like 100% healthy all the time.
Okay.
So I'm just taking a very, like, yeah.
So,
But my emotions are very much driven out of, okay, I don't know what to do for the next 10 years. I don't know if I'm going to live for the next 10 years or 20.
yes.
I don't know what to do with my career now, because I'm like, the things I wanted to do, I can't.
Yes.
So,
right. So in a specific case like this, I would do 2 explorations. What is the field of frustrated fantasy for my future? And what is the field and the understanding of what the reality of things is now? What I mean with the latter is to actually just talk about, okay, how do you feel right now? What is the important thing? What are the important things for the next weeks to do? What do you have to organize for the next months? Right? The goal for that is, I'm not too interested in the details. My goal with that would be that the mind circles around the facts of the new reality. Because this is, again, not something that it would automatically do. It would fall off 2 possible cliffs. One is, yes, I would see the reality of my sickness, but I would be depressed about it. It's like, oh, nothing makes sense anymore. I'm helpless. I'm no good for nobody if I'm ill. It would fall off that cliff, right? Or the mind would go to the other cliff of, oh, maybe there's a chance. Maybe there's some, miracle worker that I can visit in the Philippines. Maybe there's this new treatment, and so on. So it would try to escape the desperation by developing new fantasies, driven by the idea that in the end I can still pursue my career and so on eventually. So in order not to fall off of these 2 cliffs, I would engage on the one hand in a reality-based, realistic conversation about mindsets, plans, what to do, so that the mind gets used to the implication of the new standard, which is probably I will stay with this illness for a while. The second is to explore the set of frustrated fantasies, and I would declare it as such, more or less. So what are the things that you cannot do right now anymore? I cannot become an executive as I wished I would.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what would that mean? Why did you pursue to be an executive? Because I think it's good to exercise power and to bring a company to fruition and to keep people employed and so on. Right? So that would be a motive.
Mm-hmm.
And then to continue, so you think that you would be more satisfied if you did that? Yes, I do think so. Do you have examples for that? Yes, I know there's one executive, and I was always striving to be that, Steve Jobs, or a
Mm-hmm.
personal encounter and so on. So bring to work out how that is an illusionary structure that by no means is bound to be satisfactory, or would have bound to be satisfactory, that satisfaction through something like that, and it doesn't matter what it is, be skinny and beautiful, be
Mm-hmm.
successful, be whatever, that satisfaction from such an imagined outcome depends on so many other things. So many other things. And then the question, when we worked that out, the ability to spend money wisely if I'm rich,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to keep friends when I come to the fortune, the ability to have time for my family even if I'm successful and not waste all the time on the company, right? All of these things would be necessary in a successful career so that
Mm-hmm.
eventually the package makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So if the satisfaction only partly depends on the pursuit of my career, what keeps me from developing those other circumstantial elements still now? What is the reality of that? Is there something in my way to keep my friends, to stay connected with them, to spend time with my family,
Mm-hmm.
to manage my resources in a wise way that I have available right now? So again, I introduce the reality of it, and just I kind of peel off the illusionary nature of that. So that for the beginning, these would be two
Mm-hmm.
approaches that I would take with people.
Okay. And you would give that same example um, for people who are, having, mm, I would say, like the same issues, like around career or just their own habits and behaviors, right? Like they're just like, okay, everything that I do sort of like is not the right thing. And I see myself making the same mistakes.
Mhm.
Again, you would sort of go back to that particular framework, or would that be a different framework?
A little
Um,
bit different. When there's a pattern,
yeah.
right, that I want to escape, um, this is where a strong motivation for change is necessary.
Hmm.
And
How do
again,
you even find that motivation for change then, right? Like that becomes a question. So to her, the way Prema sort of
yeah,
talks about is very much, observe yourself and stay in that. And like, yeah, that's what she sort of talks about, is like stay with the shakiness.
yes. What is shaking there? What is the shakiness?
Is, the emotions, right? Like the fear, the anger, the sadness, um, the not knowing how the future will turn out, how things will, how life will unfold, all of that.
Yes, yes. So it's an insecurity of, I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what to think about that. That
Mm-hmm.
is a very specific level of our mind, right? So when I'm stuck in a habit, let's say smoking,
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of
Yeah.
simplicity, it's not good for me.
Procrastination.
I had procrastination. Yeah, that's for many
I
people.
think that's a bigger problem in this day and age than smoking.
Yes, it is. Okay, procrastination. Now, when the procrastination is one thing. I observe
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing and know very well the science of it, and when I do it and so on. So I know that, but I'm frustrated with that.
Mm-hmm. And I hate
And I
myself
don't know,
for, yeah.
yeah, wait, I don't know what to do about that.
Mm-hmm.
This would be an aspect of shakiness, my
Yeah.
kind of my helplessness in that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're not talking
Yeah.
about procrastination. We're not talking about hating myself. These are kind of factual kind of parts of my programming for now. Yes? It is what
Mm,
it is. It's just, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be changed. It should be changed. It's bad for you. Yes?
right.
But in a society where procrastination is bad, or where it hurt me so much in the past, where I couldn't deliver projects, where kind of
Mm-hmm.
people scolded me, I lost friends because of that, hating myself for it is a natural outcome.
Yeah.
Doesn't make much sense to kind of work on that.
Mm-hmm.
It would make sense to work on the procrastination, and it makes sense to work on the desperation that comes with that. It's like, I don't know what to do anymore. I read the 2
Yeah.
anti-procrastination books. It doesn't help. Now what? I don't know. I'm useless.
Yep. And that's what she says to stay with, right? And you're saying not to stay with that?
I it makes one in one case it makes sense to I would call staying with that as non-reacting to it. Again, I'm not talking about procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm
Not
saying is that
reacting
I'm
to
not.
that emotion, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
reaction to that emotion is hating yourself and like cursing yourself and being like, fuck, you still again made the same mistake over and over again in
yes.
just like one different way. Okay.
Which
Okay,
is
I see that.
already a result of the desperation, right? I
Yeah.
kind of curse myself. I hate myself because I'm helpless. I don't know what to do now.
Mm-hmm.
If I knew, then I would go about and do it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what to do, how to help myself. And in the case now, okay, from a psychological perspective, why would it make sense to stay with that? Because as a rule of thumb, this helplessness will perpetuate my procrastination. As a rule of thumb, once a habit is crafted in the mind,
Mm-hmm.
all of the components that belong to this scene are uh, are uh, co are helping to maintain it. Does that make sense to you? Everything is
Uh,
it belongs to the same thing. Like
mm-hmm.
the action of procrastinating, the cursing myself, the hoping for a better future, the hoping that the announcement of the new book about it will, all of that belongs. It's a beautiful bouquet of many aspects
Mm-hmm.
that all help together to keep this habit in place.
Yeah, I would agree to that. Yep.
And probably this psychological aspect of the helplessness and the frustration with myself is more fundamental than the procrastination. Why do I say that? Because probably I employ the same kind of emotions and thoughts about myself in other situations as well. So
Yeah.
I messed up another relationship, right? I would
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, like making that, yeah, messed up a relationship. I would have that same exact. I again made that fucking mistake. Again, it's the
yes,
same thing,
yeah,
and it's that. And for me, it's like, how do you stop yourself from hating in that moment, right? Like when you're like, I again made whatever, right? Like to me, that is when things fall apart. Like, I again made X mistake, or again made X, and X mistake could be procrastination, could be a relationship, could be, I don't know, something else, right? Or whatever's happening. But you hate yourself in that moment,
yes.
right? Like,
And
and what she's
why
saying
shouldn't
is,
you? I know it sucks. It's not a good feeling,
yeah,
but I messed up. Isn't that a natural
yeah.
reaction that I scold myself?
Yeah. And then I just tell myself, there's no point, right? Like I've been trying to fix it for such a long time. I read all these books, and
Yeah.
then I get even further depressed because I'm like, nothing is helping.
Okay. So there's an element there that is adequate, right? If I
Uh-huh.
messed up, if I betrayed someone's trust, and then they left me, friend or partner, whatever,
Yeah.
there is something adequate in blaming myself because I messed up.
Yeah.
At some point, it becomes excessive. At some point, it leaves kind of the adequate grief that I have for my loss, the loss of friendship, the loss of partnership, and I start to punish myself in an excessive way. I have nothing against appropriate self-hatred. Let me put it like this.
Okay. That should be the title of the.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
I have something, because that is a reaction to a very concrete situation. Yes,
Right.
I messed up. Now I lost a friendship. There's something definite about it. I will not get this friendship back. And I dislike what I did, and I dislike that I somehow let it happen or wanted it to happen. I dislike that, and I dislike myself for that. Now, at some point, and it shouldn't be very long, or when I start to what is isolated, I start to broaden the scope of it. The conclusion of, therefore, I'm a terrible person. Therefore, I'm not worthy of friendships in general. Therefore, I will always be alone. This is excessive, because this is not anymore an adequate reaction to this situation. Adequate would be, okay, I messed up now. Let me look at my remaining friendships. How can I make sure that that this doesn't happen with them? So I kind of question myself. I observe myself. Do I have parts of unreliability with my remaining friends as well? Okay, let me get rid of those because I don't want this to be repeated. Right? So my kind of self-criticism that was connected with the one mess up brings me to kind of to review my other relationships and to make sure that they are improving or that they are in a good place. Excessive, what I have to take care of is when it gets into a generalization. I'm a bad person, I'm not worthy of love, I should be alone because I'm a bad friend. That is excessive. And here, one of the tools that can be adopted is to, okay, let me step out of the circle of feeding those negative self-views, those negative generalizations about myself. Let me step out for a moment and let me just look at the situation again. Let me just look at myself again.
Okay.
And here I can...
And my favorite question to that is how?
I don't understand the how question here.
Like, how do you say, okay, let me look at
my situation.
Myself. Okay.
Right? So my kind of, let's say I'm inclined, I'm not good at straight thinking. I'm not good in positive thinking. So my inclination is to generalize myself about myself and to say I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
Right. So this is my intuition that tells me that, because I'm not good at self-psychology. Okay. So now I tell myself I'm a bad person. And my suggestion is, check that. See that this is an intuition of yours, but now it's your job kind of to make a realistic assessment of that. Write it down. I'm a bad person. Give me 5 pros. Give me a few cons.
Okay.
So I stopped kind of feeding this machine, bringing back to mind the situations where I messed up, reminding myself of how bad I was and how inefficient I was and how not worthy of trust I am, and so on, which is what we do when we're in a negative state. We feed it by bringing back to mind the traumatic experiences that we brought about. Step out of that and look at the conclusion of the negative thinking. I'm not worthy of love. Is that true?
Yeah.
Let me look at the opposite. I am worthy of love. Is that true? What is it about all those generalizations? Is there something that I can generally say about myself, that I'm generally a good person, generally a bad person, generally this or that? Isn't it much more accurate, if I'm looking for an accurate understanding of my situation, isn't it much more accurate that I'm very much a result of my inclinations and the circumstances?
Yeah. Yeah. Which is true most of the time, right? You're never like, even the way I was thinking was like, oh, they keep saying you're worthy of love. Yeah, you're worthy of love in some circumstances. You're not worthy of love if you're a murderer or
Yes.
you've killed people. So maybe in those circumstances you're not. So I do think you're right in saying that you are. It like our behaviors are sort of like, or our current life circumstances are very much a result of the circumstances that
Yeah.
and our inclinations in those moments, right? So.
So how I would apply this principle of groundlessness or
Mm-hmm.
staying with that would basically seek the eye of the hurricane to get into a place of non-judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can use it as I suggested in a way to look at the problem at hand, right? I can look
Yeah.
at kind of the intuitively upcoming assessment that I'm not worthy of love, for example, and question it. Or I can choose to take a vacation from judgment for a while in general. Now, people with a
Mm-hmm.
meditative kind of history will be able to do that better because indeed other people might not have the tools for that. So what that means is I could come to the conclusion of, you know what, all this judgment, hoping that I'm great, finding out that I'm not so great, all this is just crap. Let me spend the rest of the day without any judgment at all, which means in practice that I'm very good at the skill of um, dis- dissolving a thought like that when it comes up. And that needs a skill. That does not come by itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Yeah.
doing my day, I'm doing a coffee, the memory jumps up. Okay, you messed up with your friend. I have to be good at, nicely pushing
Mm-hmm.
this thought out of my mind. And then with a while, and again, this people who meditate will know this process. After a while, those thoughts leave me alone. They don't come up just every second. They will pop up every half an hour or every 2 hours. It will come back, right? So like that, with my past experience of knowing what to do with those thoughts, I can breathe more.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not good at that, I would actively question and challenge those self judgments that come up because I don't know how to be free of them for the moment.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay.
Okay. So maybe this is it for today. It didn't get too Buddhist though, right? I would like to have become so much more of a good Buddhist, but it just shows, I think, how uh, basic ideas and concepts of Buddhism, I think they need a meaningful context in order to be applicable in daily life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's for one, and that it's really challenging to break them down to something that people can understand, because otherwise those vague ideas of groundlessness and staying with what is are nice memes and spiritual formulas that can make me feel good about myself because I'm so spiritual and intellectual, but they don't mean very much if I'm not developing the skill of going further.